shaft kind of on a 45, I actually have flexion in my lead wrist.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Today I'm going to be talking about this new device that I just got that is really interesting called the HackMotion device. You may have heard about it before. What it does is, let me get in close, it measures very, very accurately how your wrists move in the golf swing. This really, in real time, communicates with your device to see exactly how your wrists are moving. And they've developed some really interesting ways of training to get better. If you've seen the channel recently, I've been working with the bag drills and hitting different things. And that old school kind of training combined with this new school stuff has really helped me a lot. So I just wanted to show a little review on what I'm doing with it. I got it plugged into my iPad here. The two main things are for that I use anyway, are I do one for putting and then one for club face control, which is what I'm using it for today with full swing. This here, my wrist like that is, let's get it to 0. So that's 0 right there. That's 0 degrees, right like that, right there. And this, let's see where 20 is. Let's go extreme. 40 degrees there. Okay, now let's go 40 degrees the other way, about there. Okay. So what we're talking about is this is 0, a flat left wrist, and this is 40 degrees of extension, and this is 40 degrees of flexion. Everything that we're going to do is going to live in the world of about 0 to about 20 and 20. So this is kind of where the golf swing happens. When I talk to some golf teachers about this, like John Erickson, who I talked to about this recently, like he'll just say that like this is just vapor trails. Like this is something that happens, but it's like you wouldn't study the vapor trails of an airplane. But I disagree a little bit because I think having this information and combining it with your training can really make you improve like way faster than if you didn't have it and you were just trying to guess. So this works really good. And then all you have to do is just start hitting balls, and it gives you a range, and you can set the range to whatever you want, but I think what they want you to do, the range that they have set on this thing, is very, very good. And what I mean by that is that they know when they went through the research of doing different amateurs with this, and then studying a lot of pros, you know, what they do with the wrist, and they didn't want to get into big disagreements, especially when it comes to things that are just more style and not substance. They saw that there's all kinds of grips, like see that would be really extended at setup, kind of like Milo is really strong with his left hand at setup. And then there's guys that are very kind of weak at setup. I like to keep this angle from here to the top about the same. And then in transition, I like it to remain the same, kind of, but it starts to take the extension of the left wrist out a little bit. And then when it gets to about here, it starts to be quite bowed. And then from here to the ball, it starts unbowing, but not all the way to here. So it basically goes here to here the same. Then it starts bowing or going into this flexion all the way to here. And then it starts unloading. So then you have more flexion here than you had at address. And also more than you had at the top, and then you hit the ball, and then here you're into quite a bit of flexion usually. Okay, so I found my explanation of what happens with the wrist during the golf swing not as clear as I wanted it to be, so I called Milo and I asked him to make a quick 1.5-minute video about what happens with the wrist in the golf swing. So here's Milo the Lines, PGA, connecting to us from, he's actually at a tournament right now, so he filmed this for us right before he shot his round.
Hey everybody, Milo here. I'm going to do a quick video on how the lead wrist works in the golf swing. So the lead wrist is a little complicated because it varies more than the trail wrist on how players grip it. So I'm going to use some generalities, and don't quote me on all of this because there are always exceptions to these rules. But first, as we address the ball, the lead wrist has some amount of ulnar deviation in it, and for most players, some amount of extension, which is this direction. So ulnar and extension, some amount. Now there are players who have weaker grips who have less extension. But what we're going to see is through the backswing, some of that extension is going away. So it's moving toward flexion, or if you're a weak grip player, it's moving into a flex state. So it's moving toward flexion, and it's also moving away from ulnar and into radial. So by the top of the backswing, there will be significantly more radial hinge than there was at address. Now, in transition, for most really good players, you're going to see some amount of flexion happening. So, like for me, for example, at the top of my backswing, I have 26 degrees of extension, and then I actually transition, and by the time I get down to P5.5, so shaft kind of on a 45, I actually have flexion in my lead wrist. I also have the maximum amount of radial hinge at that point in time. So I have max flexion and max radial at P5.5. Now from here on, I am losing both radial hinge and flexion. So I'm going into ulnar again, and I'm going toward extension, both from P5.5 into the golf ball, quite rapidly actually. But with really good players, they don't actually get back to where they started quite. So if I started at address with 28 degrees of extension, at impact, I'm going to have, for me, for example, 10. So I've lost 18 degrees of extension. That means I've got some lean in the shaft. I also have a little bit more ulnar. So I can't remember the exact numbers, but I start with something like 16 degrees of ulnar, and at impact I have something like 21. So the shaft comes up by 5 degrees. So that's basically how the lead wrist works in the golf swing.
So I go here and I go. See what that said. That got me. Okay, good. So at address, I was 30 degrees, had 30 degrees of bend here. And then at the top, I was minus 10. So I flattened it quite a bit, which is my fault that I usually do a lot. So at the top, I was minus 10. And then at the bottom, I was 14, plus 14. So I was more bowed at impact than I was at address. But so what I have to work on, and this is usually what I work on with this, is not getting too much change from in the backswing. When I got this at first, I thought what I was going to be working on is trying to hit shots with all this bow at the bottom. And that's not really where my inconsistency is. My fault that I do, that a lot of people do, that's I think this can really help with, is that I go off the ball and I start going into flexion from here to the top too much. A lot of people, they do it the other way, where they get real cupped at the top. I go too much, where I get it right off the ball, immediately off the ball. I get like this, and then at the top I have the face kind of pointed towards the sky, and then pull the handle like that. So what I want to do is I want to feel this wrist more cupped at the top, and then I want to still feel it cupped here. It was an interesting thing when I was using this that I didn't realize that if I went to the top and I felt in transition cupping, what this thing thought of, because my transition, I start moving the body back towards the target, but my hands are still going up, it would show me that at the top I was bowed, because I'd be going like this, forward, and then back left again, hands are still going up, then I'm like this. I'm like, no, I thought the top of my backswing was about here. That's what feels like the top of my backswing. So for me to get more like this and not so much like this at the top of my backswing, I have to feel like I keep that cup in my wrist all the way to here. And I think that's a lot like what Ben Hogan was saying with his secret, is that he couldn't let himself get like this at the top and keep it here. He had to feel all the way in transition like he was like this, so that he didn't get too shut and hit his hook. So, all right, here we go again. Oh, that was really good. All right, so at the top, I still had some cup in my wrist at the top. So I started at 20, and I actually added 7 degrees of cupping there, and then I took it all out by impact. I was at -1. So those are really, really good numbers for me. I don't know how it looked on video, but that's really good. And we're gonna do another part to this video where I actually hit some shots. But from some of the research that I've seen, and some of the things when you're trying to make a swing change or you're trying to work on it, you want some feedback of impact, but you don't want to be like totally locked on the ball flight when you're working on like mechanical things. And basically the perfect blend of that for me is wiffle balls. It's something that we use at the golf schools all the time. Dr. Kwan loves wiffle balls because he doesn't want people worried about ball flight, but he does want them concentrated on making center contact to the club face. That's very important. Like air swings alone wouldn't do it. And basically wiffle balls is perfect because you hit it and you try to get it in the center of the face, but then you're not really worried about exactly where it goes because it's wiffle ball, it could go anywhere. All right, so let's try that again. All right, so this time what I'm gonna do is, if you remember in the parking lot, and try to flash back to in the parking lot with Milo and I, what he wanted me to work on.
Well, all your practice swings to me look like you're going this way with the golf club, and sometimes it turns into like this kind of a motion.
Yeah.
And what I want to have is the club working more this way, the tip working more around.
This is perfect for that. So I'm going to feel like in transition, this stays cupped and the club gets that way a little bit with a really short swing. Let's see, that felt great. Okay, so that had me all green and everything. So just running back everything of that last swing, because that was a really good one. I was at address, I was at like 25. And then between address and the top, I flattened my swing a little bit, like 9 degrees, which sounds like a lot, but that's actually not that much. So I flattened my swing 9 degrees. Then by impact, I was 10 degrees extended. So I was a little even more flexed than I was at the top. But the piece that they're cutting out, because it can get confusing between top and impact, and what usually happens is good players, they go to the top, then they increase flexion all the way to about here. And then I started letting it out through impact. You do let out that angle. So that's why I think a good definition, everybody wonders about the release. I think a really good definition of the release is something I heard from John Sinclair when I took his wrist angles course, which is amazing. He says release for him is when this angle between the left arm and the golf club starts going in this direction. So if they go from the top and it starts moving this way, once this angle starts getting less, like, you know, it starts going this ways, and that number starts, like, this angle starts decreasing, that's when the release is for that player. So some people might have that would be an early release, and then this would be a late release, and this would be a no release at all until after the release would be super late and not functional. I really hate discussions about the release because it's always, the definition is always so different. But if you can just define it as when the angle between the club shaft and the left arm starts decreasing, starts being let out, then that's really good. Some people will go like this. They'll still down cock it here, but then the release would be when that angle starts going the other way. They go float load. A great thing to do with this is then just to hit short shots and kind of find that sweet spot of, now I'm really going to try to exaggerate the other way. So what I want to do is I want to have less flattening between address and the top. I don't want this thing to get all the way that way. So I'm going to try to do that kind of extreme here. So what that means, I found out what that means is more turn on the way back. If I stop turning, the hands and the club head keeps going, and that flattens this out. And then it gets into that shut condition and I'll hit pulls. But if I turn a lot, you'll see this can be maintained. So I'm going to turn a lot with the shoulders, but the club's not going to go back very far. Okay. All right, so that's a perfect example. That one's minus 17. So I flattened it a ton, and the reason is that I did a great job of keeping this angle till here, and then when my body went back towards the target, then this flattened as my hands kept going up. So then they called, what they called the top of my swing was, my body had already been going that way for a while. So for me, I have to do the same thing, but I have to feel like I keep that cup all the way till my hands get back down again to like hip high or so. Let's try that. See, then you have to turn a lot more on the way through. See, that was perfect. So that was really what I got to feel. I have to keep the hands quieter for way longer. So I started at 29, and by the top, I was at 20. So, but you got to feel what their version of the top is, if you know what I mean. Because for me, the top of my swing really feels like about there. This is when I start going back that way. But to them, the top of your swing is when the club gets to the highest point. So this actually feels like, when my hands are at the highest, it feels like my downswing is halfway done already. So then I have to keep that cupping for much longer. That was pretty good. Yep. So I just want to be in that, like I want to be like above plus 15 or so at the top. And then I want the bottom to be less than that. I want the bottom to be in single digits. I don't want it to be extreme. Like when I first did this, I was shut at the top and really extreme bowed because I think about that lag tension and lag so much all the time. I didn't really need that. And I saw Milo's numbers with this, and Milo's like 35 or something. At Milo is 35 or so, cupped at address, and then at impact, and we know that he hits the ball like that, right? But at impact, he's like maybe like 8 or 9. And so he has got 8 or 9 of extension in his left wrist. So you would think that because he's got all this, lag at impact, he'd be like this in the minus territory, but he's not. But he is flatter. So it's not about the raw number, it's about where you came from. Meaning, if you start at 30, but to buy impact, you have to be less than 30. All the good players are going that direction. They're going towards flexion. Now let's talk about how handicap golfers can really start to get better with this and what they do. What most people do is they'll do this. They'll start at whatever they start at, let's say 20 or something, I'll try to hit. And then by impact, they'll be, let's see what that was, if I can actually do it. Yeah, so that was a good example. So there, you always want to be going towards flexion. So I was adding loft too much on the way down. This is not about hitting a certain number. It's about taking your club in a certain direction. So watch, you want to get it to where you're at the top and you are taking loft off the club, which means that it's going this way towards flexion. So that by the time you're at the bottom, you can hit the club with the entire shaft going all the way up. You don't really want to you don't at all want to be adding loft through the shot. You want to be taking loft off, and then you get to about maximum there, and then it's a full release through the ball, but the net amount is all right, that should be a little better for what I'm trying to do. This is something that this wrist conditions expert called John Sinclair talked about, where Shane Lowry at the top will be like this, really cupped, maybe like 40 degrees. I'm not sure what the number is. And John Rahm at the top will be like, 20 degrees bowed. But each of them in transition is going this way. Shane Lowry's going this way. John Rahm's going this way as well. Nobody is going here, nobody good really, and going with the club that way on the way down. So the problem really is the player that's here and goes this way, or the player that's here and goes this way. So it's the direction. And they designed this software really well to say, like, okay, based off of where you started and where you were at the top, this is where you should be at the bottom, to show that you went the right direction and you're going to get a good crush on the ball. And it really does make your compression jump. Yeah, that was another good one. Same exact numbers. Okay, so this is the HackMotion. There is a link for this in the description to this video. I really like it. The thing that you'll see is that makes it really interesting is that the numbers are all different for all different pros, but kind of the force pattern of how the S-curve or so moves, you start to get an idea of the pros are all doing a similar thing in how they're working with the tool. They are working with it in such a way that they can get these wrist conditions moving a certain direction through impact. If they're this guy like this, or if they're this guy like this, they're all doing something so that they get this trailing behind them and they can line up an impact. You're just not going to last very long like trying to hit consistent shots if you're doing something that's getting you into something weird, you know, and impact. And I really like it. I think it's really good. I'm going to take this out to on the course so we can see hitting actual shots. But the best thing you can do for your game, I think, is just to use this and go hit little shots with it, trying to hit into your little range. Basically, just try to hit it in the green zone. You can adjust it off of what they did, but I wouldn't really. Now, something else that I've been doing that goes along with this is I have my carpet pad here, and I've been doing those advanced ball striking drills. Now, I don't do this with the HackMotion on, but doing this just to the pad like 200 times a day or so really does help you figure out in your feels where you want to be at impact. Let me just now. Yeah, that was really good. All in the green. I'm going to hit one final shot here. I'm going to feel that pad getting me open through here. So I'm doing kind of like what Milo's telling me to do in the parking lot, and then what John was telling me to do with the pad. Little combo here. Let's see how that did. Great, it's right in the zone. That's just what I want. A little too bowed, just a little too bowed at the top if I'm going to be picky, but it's in the green zone and I like that. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. If you're interested in the HackMotion device, there's a link for it in the description that gives you a discount if you use the promo code that's in the description. I think it's Be Better Golf. And there's lots of other cool stuff coming up on the channel. I'm meeting up with Dr. Kwan again in September. We're going to be filming some really cool stuff with him and a few students, and then also we're going to be at the Grand doing a golf school there, and probably set up some more stuff with Dr. Kwan, and I also want to set some more stuff up with Milo. So to see everything that's coming up, you got to make sure to be subscribed to this channel. If you have any questions or want to see me do other things with this, stay tuned, because I'm going to be taking this out to the range and actually hitting shots with this to show you kind of how it's used then with balls. I like using it like at home. This is like the most bare bones home setup you can have, but I do like using it at home more than anywhere, and then trying to recreate those feels when you're at the course, because you can't wear this when you're playing anyway. But for something at home, I think it's great. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.